Welcome to OmniFocus Workflows with Tim Stringer, and I'm really excited to be sharing my own setup today. And I realize that I've had a lot of guests on: Kuresh Dini and Sven Fechner and David Sparks, Joe Bulig, and Sean Blanc so far. And I realized I hadn't really fully shared my own setup, so it's time to have myself as a guest on this series here. So for those of you who are new to Learn OmniFocus, first of all, very, very warm welcome. This was a site that I first launched in June of 2014. And prior to that, I'd been working with people all over the world to support them in using OmniFocus effectively, and certainly getting to know this app better and learning how it can be used most effectively myself. Learn OmniFocus was a way of sharing that knowledge and also creating a community around this product. And OmniFocus has users literally all around the world, and we've got a good sampling here today. People joining in from right here in Vancouver, and from Japan and Switzerland and various parts of Canada and the States. So thanks to everyone who's here, and thanks to everyone who's also watching the recording of this. So just before we get in, just want to share a few things. And one is a recent addition to Learn OmniFocus. And this is the app directory. And I found there wasn't kind of one easy place to go to find out all of the apps that either support OmniFocus directly or have features that complement OmniFocus's own features. So this is something that was introduced quite recently, and you can get to it through the footer menu, or you can also go to learnomnifocus.com/apps, and that'll take you right into the directory. So if you haven't seen it already, this is what it looks like. There's a listing of apps. I think there's about 15 to 20 on there at the moment. I have about another 20 to add in, and so I'll be adding those gradually over the next few months. And if you have any of your favorite apps that you've used and you'd like me to consider them, definitely let me know. And I go through a vetting process for all of these. I do some testing, and a lot of them actually I'm using day to day myself, so I know them well. But I do go through a process just to make sure they're a really good fit for the directory. And each app is in one or more categories. And if you go to the top of the directory, you can see all the various categories. And you can also hone in on a specific platform. So if you're looking for something that works on the Apple Watch, or maybe you have a Windows computer at work and you want to see what the options are there, then you can easily find those. And then each app has its own page in the directory, just so I can give some more detail on it, to give a summary of what the app was created for, especially how it relates to OmniFocus. And at the top, you'll see these are the different classifications for the app. You can get a link to the developer's website. You can go right to the download links here. And then down below, these are all the resources that are available on Learn OmniFocus that reference this particular app. So if you want to get to know it a little better in relation to OmniFocus. And then down at the bottom, I've included some other resources in many cases, and maybe it's some tutorials that the app developer provided, or I've included some links to Screencasts Online, which is a great source of Mac and iOS tutorials. So just before we get to today's webinar, I just want to talk a little bit about a couple of things that are coming soon. The first is the next webinar in the series. It's called Start Smart with OmniFocus. And this is one I've wanted to do for a while. It's for people who are brand new to OmniFocus, so it doesn't assume any prior knowledge. But it can also be for you if you've been using OmniFocus for years, and maybe there's a few little details that you didn't quite get, or some terms or some features that are not quite clear. So this would be a great one to come to. And just in general, I think even after practicing something or using an app for years, it can be nice just to go back to basics and just look at, okay, why was this created in the first place? What are the core features, and what's the sort of basic features, and how can I build on that? So this one's a little different. I realized there wouldn't be enough time to cover in an hour, so it's actually going to be a 90-minute webinar. And I'm offering it twice on Thursday, April 28th, from 10 to 11:30 in the morning, and then in the afternoon from 2 to 3:30, and that's Pacific Daylight Time. I also want to briefly mention a course that I've been leading for almost exactly 2 years. I started the first course back in March of 2014. And this is called the Holistic Productivity Online Course. It's one that I've led to people literally all over the world, various parts of Europe and Canada, the States, Africa, Australia, New Zealand. It's been very popular down there as well. And it's really, if you want to take a deep dive into productivity, not just the tools, but the kind of the practices and the lifestyle, this is really what the course is designed around. So there's 7 sessions, over 9 hours of time together with the group, and everybody's video conference together. We'll use Zoom just like we're using now, so you'll actually be able to see everyone in the group and interact. And I find people can often get to know each other quite well through the course. And there's a maximum of 10 people, so it's a very kind of small, intimate group, and there's lots of time for sharing and questions, and you'll have an opportunity to work with one of the people in the group even closer as you go through a 90-day process and really kind of kick the tires on all of this. So the course is designed to present productivity principles, and with David Allen's permission, I get into the getting things done approach. Also, it's centered around my own holistic productivity approach, and then to bridge that into the actual application of it. Sometimes people say, oh, that sounds great, I love GTD and everything, but I don't really know how to actually apply that. Or I know these tools inside out, but I'm not really sure how to use them effectively. So it's really designed to bridge between the theory and the practical application. So there's a few apps that will feature in the course, and these are all ones that I've chosen carefully, ones that I use regularly myself. And we'll be looking at a couple of these today as part of the webinar as well. Learn OmniFocus, there's an annual membership included in the course. And if you're already a member, then you can get a $50 discount. And just drop me an email and I'll send you the code for that. So the next one is starts on March 31st and goes through to July 21st. And then there's one starting shortly after that, April 6th. The March 31st one starts at 10 a.m. Pacific, and then the April 6th one starts at 4 p.m. So that's great if you live in down under and maybe in Australia or New Zealand, or if you want to do an evening course, if you live like in somewhere like New York, then that might be an attractive option there. And if you'd like to learn more about this, you can go to learnomnifocus.com/HP for holistic productivity. That'll take you right into the page on the course. All right, well, that brings us to our guest for today, which is me. This is normally the point where I'd introduce the guest. I'd like to start by just giving a little bit of a snapshot of what my life looks like, just to give some kind of context to the OmniFocus setup that I'm using. And I live in beautiful Vancouver, Canada, and I feel very fortunate to live here. I've traveled all over the world, and I still think it's one of the most beautiful cities in the world, and we have oceans and mountains and sun shining today, which is great to see. This is actually a picture I took when I was walking across the Granville Bridge last summer, so it's an actual, not stock photography, actual shot that I took. And I live here in Vancouver with my wife. Got some great communities here in Vancouver, and just very grateful to call this place home. And in terms of the work that I do, Learn OmniFocus is definitely a big focus. And continues to be. And then another major aspect of my business is leading courses like holistic productivity, and I lead kind of a corporate version of this as well. I've led it to companies around North America and at a couple of universities here in Vancouver. So I continue to lead that. And then for years, I've been doing one-on-one consulting, or sometimes consulting with a group of people. And a lot of that's done through Zoom over the internet, which is fun because I get to work with a worldwide audience, and I really love that aspect of my work. I've also been teaching yoga for about 17 years now, and meditation, and it's definitely a real passion of mine, and I feel very fortunate. And I teach regularly here in Vancouver, and also sometimes teach at retreats. This one was taken in south of Costa Rica, and I'm planning to teach in Bali next year. Really excited about that. And I don't spend all my time focused on business. I love to travel. I practice yoga and martial arts, and I love to go flying with my father. And OmniFocus is really the tool that I use to kind of tie all of this together and make sure that each of the areas of my life is getting an appropriate amount of attention and focus. So I'd like to start off by talking about the structure of my OmniFocus setup. And as I mentioned earlier, definitely type any questions you have in the chat box as we go through. And one thing to understand here is the need for structure. Sometimes people think structure is kind of constraining. And I think this quote by David Allen kind of helps to dispel that myth quite nicely. He says, "It's hard to be fully creative without structure and constraint. Try to paint without a canvas. Creativity and freedom are two sides of the same coin. I like the best of both worlds. Want freedom? Get organized. Want to get organized? Get creative." I think that's a really nice way of looking at it, because we do sometimes really need to get creative in how we organize life, especially if life has many different facets and moving points. So I'll jump over to OmniFocus to show how I've gone a little creative with the organization. So I've got folders at the top level for the different aspects of my life, personal and business. And if we open up these further, then we'll get into kind of what are the major aspects in this case of personal. So I have administration to do. I'm involved in communities here in Vancouver and in other places. There's a car to take care of. There's certain creative pursuits. Friends and family are definitely a very big part of my life. I like to have fun, and both locally and traveling. Health is very important. Taking care of the house. Personal development, I always like to keep learning and growing. And then finances are definitely a part of life as well. So it's kind of giving each of these an area and making sure that there's kind of the appropriate tasks and projects in those to move things forward. And if I were to go into depth in one of these, for instance, fun and recreation, there's a single action list here, and I use this convention. You might have seen it before on Learn OmniFocus about putting single action lists in square brackets just to make it really obvious that this is really just a bucket of one-off tasks in a specific area, versus these other two, which are projects with a defined objective. So planning for a trip to Ontario this spring. There's also a retreat planning to attend here in British Columbia. So these have got defined objectives, and this is just kind of a catch-all that encompasses the other two. And then business is very much the same idea. I've got one for active services. So these are the four that I mentioned earlier. And for something like Learn OmniFocus, I've got a number of things going on. I've got one for just sort of a general one for content development. There's a couple of videos that I'm working on, which I think both these will be out within the next week or so. An updated one on Drafts 4 that I've had lots of requests for, as well as one on using PopClip, which is a great little utility that has some nice tie-ins to OmniFocus. And then I've got one here to open the Start Smart with OmniFocus for registration. That should be up tomorrow or Monday. So again, this is just a way of, if I want to just focus entirely in on Learn OmniFocus, I can just go into that, hit focus, and then I'm not distracted by anything else. Now, okay, I'll close it down. And then maintenance is one that's really about keeping the system up to date and relevant. And a few people mentioned earlier that one of the challenges was consistency and having the system be up to date and relevant. So this is what this maintenance folder is all about. So there's the day-to-day maintenance, even just things like making sure I'm looking in my junk mail folders in case something important lands in there. I've got one to make sure my Timbuktu bag is restocked, and that's the bag I carry around with me. So I want to make sure I have business cards in there and throat lozenges if I'm giving a talk and get a little hoarse, things like that. Then I even have just some sort of just routine things, like I use Text Expander, and I want to make sure I'm keeping that library clean. Daylight is one I touch on a little bit later too, and that's what I use for keeping all my contacts in order, and I want to make sure that I just make sure everything's put into a category so it stays useful and relevant. And then I have some around technology, so just checking to see if the Zoom software, if there are any updates. even just keeping a portable battery recharge. So if I need it, maybe I haven't used it in a couple of months, it's not very useful if it's gone dead during that time. So I find a lot of what I use OmniFocus for is not just big life-changing things, but it's all the niggly little things that if they're managed, then I can really go deeper onto the more creative work. I can not be distracted, not have kind of the inconveniences that arise. And I'll go through the other ones in just a moment when I get to the process. Checklist is one I've been using quite recently, and this was inspired by Joe Bulig's appearance here on Learn OmniFocus. And if you haven't seen it already, I definitely recommend checking out the recording. He's got some really great suggestions. And I've used checklists for years. I've formerly kept them in Omni Outliner, and I still do have some in there. But there are certain ones that I use regularly, and it's just really handy to have them right in OmniFocus. So one perfect example is one I used just before we started here today, and that's the one to prepare to teach online class or webinar. And these are all the things that I really need to do to have a successful webinar. And I'll just go through and just make sure all the ringers are turned off so I don't have like the phone. Make sure the lighting is adjusted, that I have a clock where I can actually see the time. Even just having water handy, just all those niggly little things that it's easy to forget it. And maybe not having water means that I start to get a little hoarse and, I have to pause the meeting to go get some water or something like that. And then I'll build to this list, build on this list as I, if I hit a little snag there, I'll actually add something to the list. For instance, I added something to check the audio source because when I did this webinar yesterday, I realized that I was using the internal microphone, so the audio quality wasn't quite as good. So I've just put that onto my my checklist now just to make sure I'm connected to the right source. So I found that really useful. And the way these work, they all have a context of checklist, and I'll show you my context in a moment. But I didn't want any of these to show up in my available list because, I might not be using that particular checklist. So these are always in kind of an on-hold state. I just go to it when I need it and usually go through this in about 5 minutes or so, and then I'm done with it. And the way it's set up is it's set to complete when completing last action. So when I check off all of these boxes, the project will automatically complete itself. And then it'll recreate itself a minute later. And so I'm ready for whenever I need it again. So that's, I find very useful. And just if I'm creating more checklists, I created just a little template here, which has the settings, the defer another, and the complete when completing last item. The project has a context of checklist. So it means that any items I add to it will automatically inherit that. And so if I wanted to create another checklist, I can just click on here and do Command D to duplicate. And let's say I had my flying checklist, maybe when I'm going flying with my dad, just to make sure that I'm going through all the checks. And then I would just populate the items, I'll say check oil pressure. Then I could just go through all the things that would be checked as part of that process, and that's ready to go. So I definitely find that very useful. And then templates is the last one here. And I found I was often doing the same sorts of projects over and over again. So I use templates quite extensively. So I've got one here, for instance, to open a new course for registration. So let's see what will be after Pod R will be the next one after I've done these two. So what I can do is select this, and then this is where a script comes in, written by one of the Omni Group developers. It's called Populate Template Placeholders. And there is a video on this. I won't go into all the mechanics of it, but to show that in action, I just run the script and I enter the letter of the course and say OK. And then it'll go and it'll open up, create a new project, and it'll put that letter R anywhere I've referenced it in the template. And at this point, I could change the status to active, and then I put it into my holistic productivity, and then I'd be good to go on that, and I can just dive in and start completing tasks. So if you find you're doing essentially the same sorts of projects over and over again, I definitely recommend just investing a little bit of time in setting up some templates, and it can really make a big difference. So these are the contexts I currently use. I've got energy-based contexts, so This was a client of mine had this idea of avoiding. So if there's something I'm avoiding doing, I can put an avoiding on it. I find it useful to separate the nice easy ones from the ones that require more focused attention. So if I'm really in a nice focused state, I'm really making good use of that focus time. Even though I don't put shopping lists in OmniFocus, I find it still useful to have a list of places where I do errands, and I can even have OmniFocus ping me. I might have let's say a task to pick something up at the Apple Store, and then when I'm walking by the Apple Store, I can have it notify me. Or if I wanted to go shop at Costco, I might have an OmniFocus task, which is shop at Costco, and then I go into Anylist when I want to see what is actually there to be purchased. For people, I use it quite extensively. So I've got one for my wife, for instance. So if there's something I want to talk to her about, like going to see the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra concerts, then I'll throw that on the crystal list. And then when she walks in the room, I can easily bring up everything on that list. The place ones are for the Hive is the co-working space in downtown Vancouver, where I work a couple of days a week. And there's certain things that I might need to be physically at the Hive, maybe just checking my mailbox there. Things that I need to be at home, specifically Yoga West is the center where I teach. And then I have ones for the different technologies that I have. Sometimes I'll be doing some maintenance or setting up my iPhone 5, which I use for demos, and I find it can be useful to have all of the tasks related to that device in one place. And then the bottom grouping here, these are the ones that are more for reference. You'll notice they all have the blue icon, meaning they're on hold. They don't show up in any available lists. And so there's ones for agenda. And agenda is really a place that I keep a list of things that I can pull up the next time I'm talking to that person or in that meeting. And then there are things that I don't necessarily need to do anything about right away. It's just there more for reference. So I'm part of this great mastermind group. So if I wanted to have a list of things to talk about at the next mastermind, I can throw it up on there. Checklist I've talked about already, and then waiting is to use for things that I'm waiting for. And again, I want to review that regularly, but it's really a passive action. There's no action to be taken unless I need to follow up or something like that. Something I won't get into in detail today, but I've mentioned in past webinars is there's also other tools involved, and I do a lot of collaborative work as well. I use Asana when I'm working with people on the Learn OmniFocus team. If they're doing like some web development, I use Basecamp for some community-based projects. I use Daylight essentially as my CRM to keep track of contacts and leads and things like that. And I use Trello as a way to keep track of goals. And I'll show Trello a bit later. But if you do want to learn more about these and how they all tie into OmniFocus, and it doesn't mean you need to use all of them, but maybe there's one collaborative tool which would be a really nice complement to OmniFocus. There's a webinar called Using OmniFocus in a Team Setting, and I go through all of these tools. So if you do collaborative work, as I think most people do, then I'd definitely recommend checking that out. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to go into the daily routine and habits. And as I was mentioning before we got started, habits are really a key part of this, and routine really helps to support those habits. So in a sense, productivity is not so much something we learn, but something we practice. And like with anything, the more we practice it consistently, the better we get and the more ingrained it becomes. So before going into my routines that involve OmniFocus, just wanted to paint a picture of what my day typically looks like. There's a great quote by Aristotle. He says, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit." So this is the way I typically start off my day. I do get out of bed, have a glass of water, and do a meditation in the morning. And in the past, I used to use my iPhone as an alarm clock, and it would go off, and I'd dive in and check my emails and just highly recommend against that practice. It's very easy to just go off on tangents or to go into that reactive state starting off the day. So this is a very kind of low-tech way to start off the day, and it I find really creates a nice foundation for the day. And just in general, meditation, one of the reasons for doing it is to develop what's sometimes called the neutral mind. And when we're able to operate from the neutral mind, the tendency is to be able to be with whatever's going on in life, whether it's an email that's arrived in your inbox or an awkward conversation you have with someone, and just kind of be in a neutral state around it and not react to it. So having some sort of a practice, whether it's going out and walking your dog or meditating or something that kind of connects you to yourself before you get into the day, I find can be time very well spent. It's actually a highly productive time, even though it maybe just looks like sitting there and doing nothing. I also, almost always after doing the meditation, I have some thoughts and ideas that come up, and I put them into a journal. And I've tried using paper journals in the past, and since Jean Blanc was on, I've been definitely doing more stuff on paper. He's kind of inspired me to revisit how paper fits into my system. But I love Day One so much that I do all of my journaling in this tool, and I find I'm drawn to use the tool, so I'm much more likely to journal. So I've been using that for, I guess it's been several years now, and just love the new version that came out recently. And this is, if you want to understand kind of the mechanics of all of this and why it's not a good idea to check your email in the morning and jump between tasks and things like this, this is an excellent book that many people have recommended to me, and David Allen himself recommends as well. And it really talks about the kind of addictive nature of technology and the habits we tend to get into in this technological world. And he's not really saying technology is a bad thing in any way, but we need to use it appropriately. Otherwise, it can actually be very unproductive. We can stay very superficially connected to life, but what he shares in the book allows us to go much deeper and to produce things much more effectively, to make much more effective use of time. So highly recommended. I can pretty much guarantee that it'll rock your world and have you look at all of this quite differently. So let's jump into OmniFocus now and get into more of the routine of the day. So if we go back to maintenance here, you might have noticed earlier I've got just a short little project called Perform Morning Review. So when I finish my meditation and done my journaling and things, that's typically where I would look at what's in OmniFocus. And I just have a couple of things on there. I keep it nice and simple. I look at what actions are available. And then one tip I picked up from David Sparks is the value of looking at the calendar daily and really making that a ritual of not just glancing at it, but looking at what's coming up and do I have enough time available to do the work I need to do, or do I need to start kind of blocking off some time for that? So available actions involves going up to perspectives, and I find it's, instead of looking at all available actions, it's more useful to look at it, the personal and business one separate. So if I go in here, I can see these are a list of personal actions. Typically, and like in my system, I would have more than this to look through, but this is a nice manageable list. I definitely don't want to be looking through like 300 actions in there. That would take half the morning. So I usually try to keep this list, maybe about 30 at the max and available. And then if there's some obvious ones in here where, maybe it's not something I'm going to do today, or I don't want to see it today, I can defer it off. Or maybe there's something that has become a little more important, and I might want to put a flag on that. And same idea with business. So this is just a list of all of the available actions that are within that business folder. And again, I can adjust them at this point if I need to. And then I have one just to wrap it up for maintenance. So all the available maintenance actions I have available, including my weekly review is available today. All right, and then I'll go back to this one here. And just like the checklist project, this project's set to complete when completing last action. So let's say I've just reviewed the available actions. I've also looked at my calendar, and maybe that's reminded me to add a few tasks on there, block off some time, things like that. So let's say I've completed that, then that project will complete itself. and it's deferred till tomorrow, the 18th, that it'll show up when I start work in the morning. So that's the morning review. And then as I'm going through the day, there's a couple of places I'll work from. One is the hot list, and I just have a few on here, but the idea is these are things that are either due soon or things that I've flagged as especially important. So I'll typically aim to get through everything on the hot list each day. And then if I complete all the items on the hot list, I can always go back to my available list. So these are all the available ones, and I might say, okay, I'm gonna flag another one there, throw it onto the hot list. I found this has worked well, but it's kept me more kind of focused at the task level than at the project level. So something else I've done is to create this key projects perspective. And the idea here is to identify some single action lists. So it could be a certain area, or it might be a specific project where I want to make sure I give it some energy today. And I want this to be a small list. Usually it's about 3 or 4 items. And the idea is I can go into that project. I can kind of see what's coming up, see what's down the road. I can add some tasks, move them around because I'm in this project view, and then make sure these get some attention. And one thing I've been doing even more recently that I've found has been very useful is to actually use this app called Focus to do segments of time to spend 25-minute blocks on these projects. And I recently discovered that there's actually some integration with OmniFocus through the share menu. So I'll just show you what this looks like. So imagine it's let's say it's I've just finished the webinar today, and I've got an hour blocked off to do some work. And I say, okay, it'd be nice to spend some time marketing my upcoming productivity pods. So I can select that project and then go to share. And I've got the Focus app installed on my Mac. So I'm just going to say add to Focus. And I could put a little note in there if I wanted. If I wanted to get fancy, I could even include a link to the actual project. But I'm just going to say send for now. And now I can go up to Focus. It's running as a menu bar item, and I can also open up the Focus window from here. And you'll see it's put in that item that I just sent over there. So the idea is I want to spend at least one of these focus sessions on this one thing, and I just sit down and I dive into that area. I'm not checking email. I'm not looking at something else. I give myself 25 minutes for that, and I know I'm going to have a break at the end of the 25 minutes. So what do I do is just select this one, click the play button, and then you'll see this circle starts to fill up, and it'll also start to fill up here in the menu bar as well. So I can glance up every so often and see how much time. And this is one thing that's talked about in the Brain Chains book, is really the value of just focusing in one area on one task for a specific period of time, and how much can be done in 25 minutes focused on that one task versus how little can be done if trying to focus on 10 tasks all at once. So this tool I like for kind of a practical application of that. One thing that makes it attractive too is if I bring up this is the iPhone application here, and you'll see it's brought over that same task, and it's actually synced the clocks together. So I can actually, for some reason I was away from my computer, maybe I was doing some reading in the next room or something like that, I could still see it on my phone or even on my Apple Watch, and it'll notify me when it's time to take a break. So if I were to fast forward this one now, let's say we're at the end of the session, then it's going to give me a 5-minute break, and it'll let me know when that's over as well. So the idea is to get up and move around, maybe do a little stretching, drink some water. This might be when you go and just check in on Twitter or Facebook or email or something like that, and because it's really sort of more sort of open time at this point. And then once the break is done, you can move on to the next session. And this is all configurable. By default, it basically says you get a 5-minute break between the first 4 sessions, and then you get a 25-minute break. But you can customize that as you see fit. So that's been a really, really nice addition. I've really noticed a difference in my own productivity since having that approach. All right, and now if we jump back to the maintenance one, imagine it's it's later in the day now, and the day's pretty much done. I've got an evening review, which is a little more in depth than the morning review. I found this is really useful as well. It's a nice way to wrap up the day, but also to prepare for what's coming tomorrow. So I can really start off tomorrow on a really intentional point. So this one is just like the morning review. It completes when completing the last item. I've got this one set up to show up at 4 p.m. I had it at 5 p.m. before, but I found 4 p.m. was a little better because sometimes I'd want to wrap up the day a little bit earlier. But the idea is to process the OmniFocus inbox and just make sure everything's cleared out there. And this is one that Habit the Crush really emphasizes the importance of regularly clearing out our inboxes. And I know I hear from a lot of people who kind of dump things in there for weeks on end, and then suddenly they're spending a beautiful Saturday afternoon going through their OmniFocus inbox. And it's not much fun, and it also means you're probably not going to trust your system because if you put something into the inbox and your psyche doesn't believe that you're going to process it anytime soon, you're going to continue to remember that stuff, and it'll become a distraction. I've also been using the reading list feature in Safari. Sometimes I'll see something on Twitter. Maybe it's an app that I want to buy, or it's maybe something that the conference that I want to register into. And rather than creating an OmniFocus task, which might take a few little taps, it's often very easy to just throw it on the reading list. And then what I would do is pop over to Safari, and let's say this is something that I wanted to do something with sooner rather than later. I just go through the inbox, or the reading list rather, and maybe I would create an OmniFocus action. Maybe I would just download and install this Clipatron. So I do something, and then I just clear it from the reading list and go back and check it the next day. So I found that's very useful. I also, towards the end of the day, I'll look at how many things are still available in the available list. And I'll defer those that are definitely not going to happen today. I'll defer them off to the future. There might be a few that I leave on the list because I know I'm going to be doing them this evening. And as part of this, I'll look at what actions are going to be available tomorrow. And I've created some perspectives for this. So there's one called Personal Deferred. And if I click on this, I see a list of all of the ones that have been deferred until tomorrow. And if you want to see how this is built, it's actually quite simple. I've got the context on the sidebar. So I say don't use project hierarchy. I group actions by defer date. And then I have it set to show remaining because I want to see all of the ones that haven't been completed. And then these disclosure triangles just allow me to access all the ones for tomorrow. So I would go through this. If this is getting to be a really long list, then I'll do some additional triaging on it, because I don't want to start the day tomorrow looking at 100 items on the list. I want to have something manageable to pick from. And then I might even throw a flag to say, okay, it's be really nice to register in the retreat, even though it's not happening for a little while. I just want to make sure I get a spot, so I might put a flag on that so it'll show up as on my hot list tomorrow. And it's the same idea for business deferred, so I can see all of the ones that are that I've put on my radar for tomorrow, and then just make some little adjustments there. And then if I go back to evening review, I would also choose the key projects for tomorrow. So that was the one we saw earlier. So if I go to perspectives, key projects, and you might have noticed I've got keyboard shortcuts for a lot of these. This is, I find, really helps to get to things quickly. So if I wanted to get to key projects, I just do Control-K and I'm there. And the way I built this one is maybe not quite as obvious. First of all, I want projects to show up on the sidebar here. So I say use project hierarchy. And then I specifically have projects ungrouped. And if I scroll down a little bit further, I want to see all the remaining items. So I want to see what's coming on that project as well as what's available. And then the key piece here is to add to the focus any projects that you want included in the sidebar. And if there's ones, let's say I'm going to take that one off the list for tomorrow. You see, as soon as I remove the focus, it disappears. And maybe I want to add another one, which is to maybe do some work on the Start Smart. So I've just added that. And the one thing to remember here is to make sure you click Save at the top. If you don't click Save, it's just going to revert back the next time you go into that perspective. And this will work fine on the iPhone and iPad as well. And you can even add things to your key projects on the iPhone and iPad. So pretty much everything I'm showing will also work well on those devices as well. Okay, so that's key projects. And then let's just go back to our evening review. And then the last one, I find it's kind of nice to do a quick calendar review at the end of the day as well. And I have an online scheduling program called Schedule Once. So people are actually scheduling time on my calendar. So I just want to make sure that I'm noticing how much time is being booked and blocking off some more time as soon as possible if need be. Okay, so that's the evening review. Again, if I were to mark all of these complete, it would just complete the project and then it would show up again at 4 p.m. Okay, so that's the essence of the routines. Just a couple more things to share here. This is what my iPhone, I have a 6 Plus, currently looks like. So I want to make sure I can get to things as quickly as possible. So I've customized the views. So all the things I'm likely to want to see from the iPhone, especially when I'm out and about, are there, so I can easily get to a list of phone calls. And you'll see errands peeking through there and easily jump to those things. I've also been surprised how much I've used OmniFocus on the Apple Watch. How many people have Apple Watches? Just curious. If you want to raise your hand or type in the chat box. And if you don't have one, this might be the excuse you need to get one. And one thing I found very useful is to use the complication for the hot list. So this number 8 is showing the number of items that are still incomplete on my hot list. Because one of the challenges of using something like OmniFocus is, like any technology, it can get buried and forgotten. But this way, every time I check the time, I also get a little reminder of how much is left on my hot list. And a few people saying not yet, waiting for version 2. I think that's going to be a really popular option. Maybe Apple will even pull it out of their hat on Monday. We'll see what happens there. So when I tap on that number 8, I'll actually be taken into the OmniFocus app. And I can tap on the hot list and I can actually see what's on that list. So it's nice if maybe I'm standing in line at the bank, or although I hardly ever line up at the bank anymore. I've got to come up with a new example. But I can easily just check in and say, oh yeah, that reminds me, I've got that phone call to make, or maybe there's an errand on my hot list or something like that. And then I can also do a force press on the screen, and I can add a new item just through dictation. I use that one sometimes. This is the Focus app we were using, looking at earlier, and I put in some links here. If you go to learnomnifocus.com/go/focus.mac, then you'll be taken into the App Store for the Mac version, and then -iOS for the iOS version. And I'll include these links with the recording of the webinar as well. So again, it's available on Mac and iOS as well as the Apple Watch. It's definitely not one of the cheaper ones out there, but having used it for a while, I think it can be a good investment. On the Apple Watch, I've also sometimes have a complication set up for focus, so I can just glance at my watch and see how much time is left in the focus session or in the break. And then if I tap on that, I can get into some more details there. I just want to mention one others too, and I've emphasized the importance of developing new habits. And this is the app that I'm currently using for cultivating new habits myself, and it's called Streaks. And it runs on the iPhone as well as the Apple Watch. And even if you don't have an Apple Watch yet, it's still a very useful app on the iPhone. And these are the current habits I'm developing. You can have up to 6. Which I think is a good number, and trying to develop more than 6 habits at once probably doesn't make too much sense. So I've got a habit around journaling, and I kind of slipped on that a bit. So I'm using Streaks to help cultivate that. I've got so many books to read, and I wasn't in a habit of reading regularly. So I've got a habit of reading for at least 10 minutes a day, and then a couple more for taking my vitamins and supplements regularly, because again, I was slipping a bit on that. And actually all 4 of these are getting to the point where they're quite ingrained, so I won't really need to use Streaks for this much longer, and I can develop some new habits in their place. And if you were to tap on one of these, like journal, it'll show how you've been doing, what calendar days you did it. And then you can also get pretty fancy. One thing I like is it integrates with the health app. So if you want to do any sort of fitness related apps, instead of you having to provide it with information, it can pull it right in from the health app. And you can also have it give reminders. So if I haven't marked my journaling habit complete by 12 p.m., then it'll pop up a little reminder just saying, yeah, just a reminder to write in your journal, you've done 10 days in a row, let's keep the streak going. So a little gentle nudge there. It can show up on an Apple Watch too. You can have it as a complication. So this has the four dots, and 2 of them are completed and 2 are still waiting to be completed. So again, I can see that at a glance. And then I can just tap on that complication, and I can use my Apple Watch to mark that habit as done for today. Okay, and just to wrap up the day, I've gotten into the habit of reading in the evening, and I like using the Kindle. I turn off the backlight, so I'm not getting any of the backlighting that might compromise my sleep at night. And I also like the Kindle because it doesn't check my email and things like that, so I can use that. Even though I'm using technology, I'm unplugging from email and social media and all that, and I found that's a really nice way to wrap up the day. All right, so I'm just going to push through these next couple of sessions fairly quickly, and I'll reference some content on Learn OmniFocus, and just want to make sure we have some time for questions as well. And I see a few coming into the chat box, and definitely keep them coming. This next one is around managing the big picture, and this quote from Alice in Wonderland is the Mad Hatter talking with Alice, and she's asking him, which way should I go? And he's saying, well, where do you want to get to? And she says, well, I don't really care. And he says, well, it doesn't really matter. So it's really easy to get caught up in productivity and kind of organizing sort of the day-to-day things without really looking at the big picture. And it's important to make effective use of our time and do focus work and things like that. And it's equally important to look at the big picture and where things are going. So it's what Stephen Covey talks about is the clock and the compass, and how we tend to be overly focused on the clock and not so focused on the compass. So I just want to share a little bit about how I use OmniFocus to make sure that I'm managing the bigger pictures of life, the higher horizons of focus, as David Allen would put it. So let's step back into OmniFocus. And so I've got one for the weekly review, and this is kind of getting into those higher horizons of focus, and just making sure that about once a week I'm hitting the pause button, I'm taking stock, bringing the system up to date, looking at what's actually in the system, and that's where OmniFocus's review feature is very useful. And then just making sure the system is complete. So some of this is more kind of reflective, and some is a bit more sort of mechanical in terms of having a checkbox for each of the various inboxes where I collect things and making sure that I've processed that into the system. And there's a video on this, so I won't go into too much detail. But one reason I like having this project is sometimes I don't do the weekly review all in one sitting. I might do a little bit at home before going to my office downtown, and then might finish it up when I get downtown, or vice versa. So it can be really nice just to know how far I am into the process, and so I don't forget anything. And one of the key pieces in here is to look at all of the goals that I've set for the year that are personal, and look at all the business goals that I've set for the year. And I manage these through Trello, and I'll give you a little peek at what that looks like in a moment. So that's the weekly review. And then once a month, and I've adopted Joe Bulick's suggestion about doing this the first day of the month, is to go through all of my areas of focus. So I've got a mind map that maps out all of the different responsibilities I've taken on in life. And there's quite a bit of material on Learn OmniFocus that talks about that in more depth. And at this point, I also look at all of the personal goals and business goals, whether they're active or not. I might say, okay, it's time to start moving forward on this goal, or this one is complete, or what was I thinking? I've decided to just let go of this goal, those sorts of things. That's also a great time to look at the someday maybe list. Maybe it's time to step into action and start to create that new business, or take that trip to Africa, or whatever's on there. And then key one here, and I have this for the weekly review as well, is to actually have an action to schedule some time for the next monthly review, so it doesn't just kind of get lost in the lost in the busyness of life. So doing these two, I find, really makes a big difference. And then one that I don't have on here is an annual review. And I'll usually do that over the course of about a week at the end of the year, and just have some good reflective time and conversations with my wife and friends and things like that, and just get the inspiration going for the next year, and maybe start to look at some of the longer term planning there. So those are the reviews in OmniFocus. Trello I've found is the tool that I'm most motivated to use when it comes to keeping track of goals and where I'm going. I did use Evernote last year, and it worked well, but Trello I find is just more visual, and I'm just really more drawn to use it. So these aren't my actual goals, but this is similar to what my setup looks like, where I have a list for each quarter of the year. And then the green means it's complete, the yellow means it's in progress, and then if it doesn't have any label, it means it's not something that I'm actively involved in. And so behind these cards, this is just a screenshot, but if I were actually using the setup, I can click on that and I can see all of the details behind it, and maybe add some comments and things like that. For things like the read 10 books on productivity, I actually have a list and I check them off as I go through, and it'll show you, I don't know if you can see that too clearly, but it shows 2 out of 10. So it means I've done 2 out of the 10. I can just see a little status update right on there. And this question from Ryan, why no more mind maps? And I still use mind maps extensively. I just love mind maps. And actually many of these goals, well, as I develop them further, there'll be a mind map where I kind of take the idea and go deeper into it. So this definitely doesn't replace mind maps. It's more kind of a nice visual way of looking at where things are going. For the business, I have one list for each month. I find I need to get more granular with that. But for personal goals, I found it was sufficient to have one for each quarter. And then just briefly touching on this next bit, and again, most of this I've covered on Learn OmniFocus already, but I just want to highlight a few things. And one is people often ask me, now that I have OmniFocus, I probably don't need reminders, right? And I actually find reminders is a very, very useful tool. First of all, it's one way to get tasks into OmniFocus using Siri. That's one convenient thing for it. I also use it for things like if I want to be reminded at a specific time or location. So if I were flying off to Ottawa tomorrow, or on, let's say on Saturday, and I wanted to check into the flight or get a boarding pass tomorrow, I want it to remind me exactly 24 hours before the flight so I can get the best seat. So that's a good use for reminders. OmniFocus is not really designed for those notifications. I could kind of make it an overdue item or something like that, but it just feels a lot cleaner just to keep it in reminders. I might have one to remind me to take out the trash when I get home, or when I leave work, my downtown office, I'll often send my wife a message that I'm on my way. So this will ping me if I forget to send the message once I leave the area of my work. So very, very handy and practical. And I used to put shopping lists and reminders, which worked quite well. But more recently, I've been using a tool called Anylist. And it actually draws from reminders. And you can find that at learnomnifocus.com/go/Anylist. And there's a free version, and there's also a paid version, subscription-based, if you want to get fancier with this. But basically, you can have lists and reminders, so you can add things to reminders using Siri, and then it'll actually pull out of those. So if I said Siri, add bananas to my Costco list, it'll see that something's been added to Costco, and it'll put it into its own Costco list. And the nice thing here is it'll put things into different groupings, so I can see all my grains separate from the household and cleaning. So when I'm actually at the store, it's more convenient. And then it'll also keep a history list, so I can keep track of what I've purchased there in the past, and that might help to jar my memory as I get ready to go to the store. If you have the paid version, you can also go on to the Mac and access it either through a web browser. They actually have a Mac application you can use, and everything stays in sync. And you can also share this with other people. So maybe you're sharing it with your significant other, and either of you can add things to the list, and they'll show up on your shared list. AppleScript is something I've talked about quite a bit. I just want to point to a few that I use quite regularly here. Let's go into the available list. And let's say I'd see if I have any phone calls. Yeah, so let's say I just phoned Cameron with a story idea. First of all, I've got a link into Daylight, so I can pop in here and I'll be taken to Cameron's record right away. And then I'll just go back to OmniFocus for now. And then let's say I just made that phone call. I could check it complete. Maybe I didn't get through to him. I just left a voicemail. I could mark it complete, and then I could create a waiting for action. But that's a little tedious. So instead, I use this little script called complete and wait reply. And it's Control Option spacebar is a shortcut key I've set up using fast scripts, which is another little utility I've covered here. So if I select that, you'll see it marks it complete, and then it creates a waiting for action. So if I go to my waiting for list, there's one that's been created for me automatically. So nice little time saver there. Another one that I find is very handy is, let's say I were looking at one of these areas here, let's say fun and recreation. I wanted to jump to this project. I could go up here and say focus in new window, and it'll open up a new window focused in on that project, and I can do whatever I need to do and then just close the window down and I'll be right back where I was before. So nice little practical thing there. So it's AppleScript. Fast Scripts is the menu that allows you to access it and add keyboard shortcuts. And then Keyboard Maestro, lastly, I covered this in the Automating OmniFocus, and basically I have keyboard shortcuts set up for all of the sort of common perspectives and features that I use. And the nice thing is these can be used anywhere I'm on my Mac. So if I wanted to jump to a specific project, if I were in OmniFocus, I would do Command O to go to the open box, but in Keyboard Maestro, I can do Control Option Command O, and that actually brings OmniFocus up to the foreground, and it should open up the, there we go, it opens up the little box there. And similarly, if I was in here and I wanted to quickly jump to my hot list, I can do Control Option Command H, and it takes me into OmniFocus and takes me right into the hot list here. So just one little thing, but I find it gets me to where I need to go very quickly. And I think anything in general that kind of reduces the friction is very useful. And as I mentioned, these are all covered in Automating OmniFocus, which is another one of the webinar recordings that's available. All right, so I hope that gave you a good overview of things, and I could certainly go into a lot more detail on these. Definitely let me know if you have specific questions. I'm just going to go through the chat box here as well. How did you modify the menu of perspectives in OmniFocus? I thought someone might answer. I think the question there is maybe how I got the lines in here. And all I did is I added a perspective, and then this is just the title of the perspective. So it's just a perspective with that name. I found before I had this just a big long list without the separators, and it was almost a bit dizzying to look at. So having these little lines in here really helped. And if you're not aware already, you can just go in here and you can rearrange all the perspectives. This line, if you want to get fancy, was created using a long dash, which on a US keyboard, if you type Option Shift and then dash, it'll enter in the long dash, so you won't get any little spaces between the dashes. The question, how do you link Daylight with OmniFocus? Yeah, that's actually very simple. I covered that on the using OmniFocus in a team setting, but we'll just have a quick look at that now. So if I go into Daylight, I'm seeing a list of contacts here. And what I can do is control click or right click and then say copy hyperlink. So if I copy that, and then I could create a quick task here. I'll just open that up. And let's say the task is to, let's say, review notes from meeting with Cameron. And then what I can do is go into the notes field and then paste in the link. And then when I click on that link, that'll take me right to Cameron's record. Even if Daylight isn't running, it'll actually launch Daylight and take me right into that information there. So I find that's really handy. I can just save that for now. And I won't go into any detail here, but Daylight is basically, it's kind of like a pro version of the apps that come with the Mac, like the calendar and the contacts. And it's also one that's designed to be used in a team setting, so you can be sharing this information with people. You can have shared projects. You can use it to track opportunities and pipelines. So it's a very beautifully designed application, and I find it's a really nice complement to OmniFocus. Okay, another question there, and thanks for asking that one. Who's asking what's the difference between Business and Business Plus? So I'm just going to skip back over to OmniFocus. So Business is showing me all of the available business actions, whether it's flagged or not. And then Business Plus is exactly the same, but it only shows the ones that are due or flagged. So you'll see there's only 2 on the list. So if I have the hot list, which shows me all of my flagged or due items, but I might not want to see personal items. Maybe I'm focused in on business. So this gives me a nice way just to see. It's kind of like a hot list for business would be one way of looking at it. Do you add any of your Asana tasks to OmniFocus, or do you keep them separate? I tend to, sometimes I'll have actions in OmniFocus to review Asana. And sometimes I find this happens in general using things like Asana and Basecamp, is people often don't assign tasks, they'll assign entire projects. So they might, let's say I get a task of write reports about trip to Washington or something like that. Then that's definitely not a task. It's a project, and I can manage that project within OmniFocus. So I would create a project within OmniFocus that's write report about trip to Washington, and then I would link it to the Asana task. And then once I'm done with the OmniFocus project, I could just click on the link and mark it down in Asana. If you go to using OmniFocus in a team setting, I talk more about how those interact. And if you want to get fancy, you can use a service called Zapier, which will automatically add Asana, or also works with Trello, into OmniFocus. So it's a really nice integration. In fact, when I mark, when I'm using Trello for my goals, when I mark a goal active, I assign it to myself, and that causes it to show up in my inbox in OmniFocus without me having to do anything. So that's a really nice little addition. Question about, do you incorporate text expander within OmniFocus? Yeah, definitely, and I did a video on this as well, but briefly, let's say I were just creating a quick task here. I have this convention, you might have noticed, of having the type of action, so like review or phone or email, followed by a colon. So let's say I wanted to create an action to phone Bill. So I could say phone Bill, I might put something in the notes field, etc. Then say save. So what I did is I typed XPHO, and that filled in the phone Bill colon. Or I might have another one to create project to plan trip to Japan, let's say. So I, again, just typed X and then the first 3 letters of this, and it filled in the rest for me. Then I click save. And the reason for using those conventions, or one of the reasons, is I can actually go into, where did it go here? My calls list. There it is. So phone calls, which will show me a list of the phone calls in the system. And the way this finds them is to look for actions that contain the text phone colon, and that just pulls them right out of the system that way. And just to complete that, if I go into text expander, that's my, this is not my main system, so it's just a very simplified version of it, but these are all the different text expander snippets that have been created for OmniFocus. And if you go to Learn OmniFocus, actually you can find these through the app directory. You can actually download these snippets in English as well as in German as well, thanks to Clemens. You were the one who translated that. He was here today, so he translated all these into German. So that's text expander. Request from Manel to discuss deferring tasks and how to use it properly. Yeah, so the way I use it is pretty much the way I describe it here, is to basically start from an available list, and then I'll set the defer date to when do I next want to see that item on my available list. So like this one here, email Joe Bulig with script idea. Maybe I realize that it's not that important. It's just kind of a secondary sort of thing. So maybe my week's pretty full this week, so I'm just going to say put that on my list on Monday, or because I know I have some time Monday. So it's kind of looking at your calendar and looking at how many things are on the list, and just getting to the point where you have a reasonable list of things to pick from on the list. So if you know you're going to be in meetings all day on Friday, it probably doesn't make sense to defer a lot of things to Friday. Maybe defer it to Monday when you have more time available to work with it. So I use that word triage a lot. It's like if you've been in emergency wards, that's really what they have to do, because they don't know how many people are going to be coming in the door that day, and there's going to be some that are more urgent than others and things like that. So it tends to be the same with our tasks. Hopefully it isn't quite as dramatic as that, but there is this notion of the sort of changing landscape of life, and how something that maybe deserved a place on the list for Friday today might be bumped when tomorrow comes along because there's something unexpected that came along. So it's really just being agile with it, not putting too many tasks into OmniFocus, only putting the things in there that you intend to do, and not sort of the ideas, the someday maybes, things like that. But definitely using OmniFocus to remind you to look through all those lists of ideas and things. And I find that's a good balance to keep OmniFocus nice and lean and trim, and keep all the sort of idea things externally, and then have OmniFocus prompt you to review those things. What part of your day review your inbox and assign them to projects and contexts? If there's anything left in the inbox, I'll process it at the end of the day. Sometimes I might just take a break, part way through the day, and just, especially if I find there's a lot of stuff accumulating in the inbox, I might just deal with it then and there. And in keeping with the GTD principles, something might be in my inbox, and I might just do it right away if it's going to take me less than 2 minutes. Maybe it's just making a quick phone call or sending a quick email. So I wouldn't even bother processing it into the system. I just normally just take care of that and then delete it and save myself the extra work there. Use the forecast view. Yeah, that's one I often look at, especially when I'm kind of life's getting quite busy and I just need to maybe defer some tasks. This is a great sort of guideline just to see kind of where the weight is. So if I have 6 things due on Friday, then that would be a cue to me just to make sure that I'm blocking some time off on Friday. So maybe I have a couple hours that nobody's claimed yet, and I'm just going to claim that for myself, or at least claim part of it, so I make sure that I'm delivering on the promises. One thing that I've mentioned several times before in various places too is to use due date sparingly and only for things that are actually due. So don't put a due date on something unless there's a consequence to not having it done by that date. Otherwise, it becomes hard to distinguish between what's kind of due and what's nice to have done. And the alternative to using due dates kind of arbitrarily, I find, is to use the flags. And flag the things that are important that you really like to get done, and then use due dates just for things that are actually due. Have you written a post or done a webinar that covers more of your Zapier recipes? Yeah, if you go to the using OmniFocus in a team setting, I talk about using Zapier with Basecamp, Asana, and Trello. So that'll give you hopefully enough to get started. And there's certainly a lot of recipes on the Zapier website. And they've recently updated things so you can even have multi-step Zaps now, which is, I haven't been using that so far, but I'm sure that'll open up some really intriguing workflow possibilities. So I'll probably do an update on that sometime in the near future. And although my system hasn't changed, I wouldn't say it's changed dramatically over the years. I do make some adjustments as time goes on, and as I hear some other ideas of how to do things, and as the Omni group adds more features to OmniFocus and things like that. So there's definitely been some tweaks over the years. And you want to make sure you're not spending too much time fiddling, but if you kind of enjoy polishing up the system, as I do, then that can also be some time that's well spent.
I just want to say, it's very nice to see that clean structure. Let's be proud of it.
Okay, well, thanks for that. I think that brings up a good point, is that OmniFocus should be attractive to look at. If you look at OmniFocus, then there's something not quite right there. That's the real measure of your system, is that sort of experience you have when you open OmniFocus. If you feel your stress levels kind of drop and you feel more relaxed because you say, okay, this is all stuff I don't need to keep in my head, then that's probably a really good sign that you're using OmniFocus effectively. And if you don't open it for a week because you're tired of seeing the 300 items in your inbox, then time to do some house cleaning and maybe come to the Start Smart with OmniFocus. And for some people, it might be kind of a restart and just a chance to kind of revisit how to use this technology.
Once in a while, when I'm traveling, I have no chance the last 2 weeks to look. Okay. And I, as you say, fall off the wagon. Yeah. I have to keep on. And every day you have 40 to 50 items in the inbox. And after a week, it's you can put it away.
Yeah, so it's maybe a matter of just watching.
You cannot go through.
Yeah. And it's maybe if some of those things that are going into the unbox are like ideas or incomplete thoughts or something, it might be worth parking them somewhere else, putting them into Evernote, something like that.
Yeah. I started to capture the ideas when I'm traveling into Evernote. Yeah. So I go through the Evernote, and when I see, this item is to be captured in OmniFocus, I put a link on OmniFocus back to Evernote, and and the rest goes to the archive. Yeah, just for retrieving purposes, and that's it.
Okay. Yeah, like you're keeping it in the OmniFocus archive. Like these are things that you haven't completed. Like you're just there for reference, or
just for reference. The thing I completed in OmniFocus, I go back to Evernote and put it in the archive, so I can go back when I'm searching for, but it's out of the mind.
Yeah. Okay, nice. Yeah, and Dean says, when traveling, I don't rest in the evening until I process the inbox. And I think that's a good practice, because it's easier to do this every day. Like many things, it's easier to keep on top. And if things do get a little out of control, then that's totally understandable. It's just setting aside a little time to get caught up, and then life goes on. I took a week, I was on vacation in Cuba for a week, and I continued to use OmniFocus throughout the vacation because I still had actions to do. I had to maybe book a trip to Havana or arrange dinner or something like that. And so it was still useful, and pretty much everything in there was personal. I did have a few work-related ones, and I wanted to have an easy place to go, so I'm not having to remember to do work-related things or to email someone on Tuesday. And then everything that I didn't get to before the trip, I triaged it out. So when I got back, again, I didn't want to have 300 items on my available list when I got back. So I was thoughtful about having some on Monday and then some on Tuesday and some on Wednesday, kind of spreading them out through the week so that I could ease into work more gracefully there. Okay, and thanks for all your comments here. And key project and personal deferred perspectives will be game changers. Okay, excellent. Great to hear that.
Well, there's actually kind of two questions. One, I know she didn't talk about Evernote, and I know you were just talking about them with Clemens. And I was kind of wondering, like, to what extent do you still use it, or how does that fit in the workflow? The second thing was, I noticed that here we have the third item on your inbox. You prefix it with create projects, so you actually create tasks to create projects in OmniFocus.
Yeah, exactly. Because sometimes. Like, let's say it's to file my 2016 income taxes. Maybe I don't even need to create a project till like January for that. So I could create a project and defer it to January, but I find sometimes it's just easier to create an action which prompts me to create a project off in the future. Because there might be kind of nothing to do about it just now, but I know I'm going to need a project at some point, so I can have OmniFocus prompt me to do that.
And then about Evernote.
Evernote. Yeah, so I still use it extensively. It's something I use for specific things, largely for kind of reference. So I keep all of my health records in Evernote. I keep a lot of my research in Evernote. So I'm thinking of switching to DevonThink, partially so I can try out that application, which is similar to Evernote in some ways, but different in others.
What's it called?
DevonThink.
DevonThink.
Yeah, it's very popular with researchers. It's probably best known for its search algorithms that can make it very easy to find information in a very large database. And Evernote does quite a good job at that as well. But if you have a lot of data to go through, then DevonThink could be a good option as well. And one thing about DevonThink, not to go too far on this tangent, is you can actually have files in the Finder and folders, and you can just literally point DevonThink to those folders and continue to use the Finder and everything. But DevonThink is going to do all its indexing. So for somebody who doesn't want to be in a kind of more of a sort of proprietary database, that's one use there. So back to Evernote. Yeah, so I use it when I went to Cuba. I stored all of the travel documents and the ideas of things to do and things in there, and I shared that with my friend I was traveling with. So that was really useful because we could both contribute to that notebook. So it can be really useful for any sort of collaboration things. I keep my someday maybe less in there. So it's using it for just deciding what to use it for, and then kind of sticking to that, and not. So before, when I first started using Evernote, I thought, okay, I'm going to use this for everything, and that just didn't go so well. So now I use it for specific purposes where it makes sense, and then I use maybe Dropbox for other cases where it's more convenient just to have like a file and folder structure. So thanks again for joining today, whether you were here live or you're watching this recording. And again, if questions do come up, and maybe after watching the recording or going through this again, definitely let me know and send me an email. And if I might send you a response if it's something I can easily answer by email. And if not, I'll look at maybe producing some content on Learn OmniFocus that addresses that. So I hope to see you again soon, maybe at the next webinar, and I'll be announcing some more webinars soon. I've still got quite a few ideas for some other guests and things to invite, so I look forward to launching those soon. And yeah, in the meantime, take care, and thanks again for being here.